Noura Erakat, who is a human rights lawyer and associate professor at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. Good to see you, Noura. Thank you very much for joining us. Can we start firstly by talking about Jake Sullivan, who is going to be in Israel today? We understand he's going to ask Benjamin Netanyahu and the war cabinet for some kind of timetable for the end of the conflict, and he's also going to say he wants to see more precision strikes inside Gaza because of the US concern on civilian casualties. But there's already pushback against both of those things in Israel, and I wonder how much influence the US actually has at the moment.
I think that the US has tremendous influence in that if President Biden had the wherewithal, he could end Israel's campaign today with a single phone call. Israel could not continue its campaign without the US's provision of diplomatic impunity at the Security Council, nor without the military aid sent to Israel without oversight. What Jake Sullivan is doing right now is performative and inadequate. What the United States is doing right now is continuously providing Israel with the weapons, with the cover, and then telling it to be careful. The United States, it should be pointed out, has a serious democracy problem. Internally, 61% of Americans support a ceasefire, and only 11% of lawmakers have endorsed that ceasefire in Congress. On the international level, the United States has used its UN veto power, its Security Council veto power, twice to override the will of the international community, most recently in the use of General Assembly Resolution 377, where 153 states endorsed a ceasefire. The United States at this point should be understood as a direct pillar and part of the problem, and what it is doing right now is inadequate and performative.
And Noura, how much damage do you think this is doing to the US's relationship with some of their other allies in the region, that they will then be calling on when the war ends to help provide aid, assistance and money to Palestinians?
You know, the problem with the United States' relationship with these governments and regimes in the region is that those very governments and regimes do not necessarily represent the population on the ground. So this is a continuation of the U.S. also providing for those regimes cover in order to override the will of their populations, as has been seen with the continuation of the Abraham Accords, where the U.S. Created normalization agreements between several countries and Israel, despite popular opposition, despite not exacting a single measure in order to end the occupation or lift the siege or approximate a meaning Palestinian freedom, and yet it didn't matter. And what we're seeing now is continuing to place a lid on the concerns of those populations, even while the U.S. tells the world that it is a beacon of democracy, spreading democracy, when in fact it is entrenching authoritarian and undemocratic rule.
When you mention the fact that the U.S. is isolated at the UN, that is obvious, as they were the only country to use their veto. But there are so many questions around the world as well about how impactful the UN can be, the influence the UN can be. They're under attack by Israel, but by others as well, who are saying they're just simply not able to do enough. What else do you think the UN could be doing right now?
You know, obviously, the U.S. has made the Security Council, which is a source of significant enforcement power captured in Chapter 7 authority of the UN Charter, which would enable us to impose a ceasefire as an international community. But number one, this demonstrates a political will that continues to highlight how the U.S. is a pillar of the problem. Number two, outside of the UN, each of these states can mobilize. They can rescind their ambassadors from Israel. They can impose trade sanctions. They can impose weapons sanctions. They also have the authority, lawyers have the authority across the world to invoke universal jurisdiction in order to serve Israeli generals, soldiers, politicians with arrest warrants on their soil, as was done, for example, in 2005 and again in 2016 against Duran Omag for his role of ordering the bombing of 59 homes in Rafah in 2002, as was done in the United States when a group of attorneys, including myself, sued Avi Dichter and Moshe Ya'alon for their role in the bombing of a UN compound in the south of Lebanon, as well as in the bombing, the razing of 5,000 homes in the south of Gaza. These human rights issues, these violations, these war crimes and crimes against humanity are systemic and endemic, and we all have the ability to unite in order to overcome them.
Noura Erakat, thank you very much for joining us.